Welcome to the basic principles of genetics. Gregor Mendel was an Australian monk who studied pea plants. There were three major things that he learned and that we still know today about classical Mendelian genetics. The principles of dominance. Gregor Mendel noticed that when he bred his pea plants, one of the traits became hidden. Those would be the traits that we call recessive. The principle of segregation. The pairs of alleles from the parents separate during meiosis. So during gametogenesis, during spermatogenesis, during oogenesis, there's lots of separation of the individual alleles, the letters we use to represent the traits. Thirdly, the principle of independent assortment. Genes for different traits are passed on independently of one another. This shows that genes are on separate chromosomes. For example, you might get the rolling tongue gene and the hitchhiker thumb gene, but then you might have webbed toes. Who knows? I'm sure by now you already know how to do classical Mendelian genetics monohybrid crosses, where you look at one trait at a time, when something is dominant and something is recessive. Here's an example for albinism. If you're albino, you don't have any pigment in your skin. It's a recessive trait. So it says to cross a heterozygous parent. That would be somebody who is hybrid for the trait. That's big A, small a. Cross that parent with another one who is homozygous dominant. Homozygous means pure. What would you get if you cross these two parents? Homozygous dominant is shown on the top. Heterozygous should be shown here, but it's not. This Punnett square is actually set up improperly. So what we need to do is change this to a little a. So there was just a mix-up on this printout. I'm fixing it here. So we end up with two children that are big A, homozygous dominant, and we end up with two children that are heterozygous, big A, little a. That's both for the genotypes, the types of genes. The phenotype, though, how would all of these children look? How do the parents look? How do the offspring look? They are all normal pigmented skin. Normal. Sometimes traits are not quite as quick, easy, painless, simple as dominant versus recessive in what we call classical Mendelian genetics. In this case, we're talking about non-Mendelian genetics. So sometimes traits are incompletely dominant or codominant. Sometimes there's polygenic traits or multiple alleles, and even traits that are carried on the sex chromosomes, either the X or the Y. For problem number 1 here, we take a look at red parents and white parents, but the children, the offspring from the red and white cross, end up being pink. If you notice, red is symbolized as RR, white is symbolized with WW, but the offspring, RW, are not red or white, but a combination of both. This is what we call incomplete dominance, where there is blending. Is there any such thing as a pink gene or a pink allele? No way. You need a combination of both red and white at the same time. In the case of codominance, I always say both, show. Both show. In the case of codominance, we have a red fish, and we have a blue fish, and we end up getting a fish that is both red and blue at the same time. We use different alphabet letters to symbolize these because red is not completely dominant over the blue. The blue is not completely dominant over the red, but a combination of both alleles results in a new phenotype that didn't exist before. If you had red over blue, this would be classical Mendelian genetics. That's not the case for here. Much like if you took red plus white, it would make pink up above, like we saw with the case for incomplete dominance. There's no such thing as a pink gene or a pink allele. It doesn't exist. What we do know, though, is that a combination of red and white could make pink. In this case, like the fish, if you had a red fish and a white fish, you could end up with a fish that is both red and white, because both show. Both show. Lastly, for this page, we talk about polygenic traits. This is typically the case for most things we look at as human. It's not cut and dry, yes or no, you have it or not. But in the case of polygenic traits, poly stands for many, genes, genic refers to the genes, the DNA, the alleles, the letters you inherit from your parents. You could have lots of genes that you get just for your one tone of skin, for your hair color, for your eye color, and your height. It's not as simple as pea plants where a tall and short made tall pea plants. In the case of tall and short parents, you could end up being medium, or taller than both parents, or shorter than both parents. In many cases, polygenic traits are what we have as our human features. It's not simple, classical Mendelian genetics. I wanted you to keep this information in mind as you work through your Bikini Bottom genetics worksheets when you do work with SpongeBob SquarePants from Bikini Bottoms. Thanks for being here.